The alien princess stared at me and whispered, "Human, do you still remember what you did to save me?" The sirens were already dead. Not malfunctioning. Not glitching. Dead. Every emergency channel on the ship had gone quiet at the same moment, and that kind of silence in deep space meant one thing. Whatever hit them had not been an accident. Corporal Kevin Adler was running before the lights went red. He did not wait for orders. Orders took seconds, and seconds were the most expensive currency in a breach scenario. He had learned that the hard way at Kepler Station, back when he still believed that following protocol meant something. The corridor shook, a low, deep vibration that moved through the floor and into his boots, and up through his spine like a tuning fork pressed against bone. He grabbed the wall rail, caught his balance, kept moving. Adler. The voice crackled in his earpiece. It was Lieutenant Dana Cole, the ship's tactical officer, and she sounded like someone had knocked the calm clean out of her. Deck 4 is compromised. Do not go to Deck 4. Cole, what kind of breach are we talking about? The kind where I'm telling you not to go there. The air on the other side hit him like heat, and something else, something metallic and sharp, the smell of a system burning from the inside out. The emergency lights were the color of old rust. Every door along the corridor had blown inward, and then he heard it. Not an alarm, not an explosion. A sound like wind being pulled through something too small to hold it, thin, high, and wrong in a way that made the back of his neck go tight. It was coming from the containment lab at the end of the hall. Kevin moved toward it because that was the only direction that made sense. The containment lab had been sealed for 11 days. He knew that because the crew talked about it in the same low voices people use when they are trying not to be superstitious. The ship's commander, Captain Lou Garrett, had brought something aboard at the Varan waypoint and given the whole deck restricted access with zero explanation. Official logs listed the cargo as biological specimen, non-threatening, under diplomatic protocol. The crew called it the package. Kevin had not asked questions. He was a corporal. Questions were not his job. But the sound coming through the lab door was doing something to him that he could not name. It was pulling at something behind his ribs, urgent and insistent, like a hand grabbing his collar. He overrode the lock with his emergency access code. It took 4 tries. His hands were steadier than they had any right to be. The door opened. The containment chamber inside was cracked along the left wall, and through the crack, a pale blue light leaked out in pulses, slow and rhythmic, like something breathing. The room was full of a fine white vapor that sat at knee height and moved when he moved. At the center of the room, inside a transparent holding cell that had clearly been designed to be far stronger than it currently was, there was a figure. At least, that was the first word his brain reached for and immediately knew was insufficient. She was humanoid. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. But the proportions were slightly wrong in the way that a painting of a human is slightly wrong, technically accurate but built by something that had studied rather than lived. Her skin was a pale silver gray that caught the blue light and threw it back differently at every angle. Her hair was white and floated around her head, like she was underwater. Her eyes, when they opened, were entirely black. Not iris and pupil, just black, edge to edge, the way a night sky is black when there are no stars. She was looking directly at him, and she was terrified. Not of him, or not only of him. Terrified the way a person is terrified when they have been waiting for something bad, and it has finally arrived, and they are running the numbers on whether they will survive it. The chamber wall had a crack running floor to ceiling. Someone had tried to get in. The scoring marks on the outside of the cell told him they had been using something thermal. Someone had been cutting their way in when the breach hit. "Hey," Kevin said, because it was the only word that arrived. "Are you hurt?" She stared at him. Her lips moved. No sound came out. He crossed the room, stepping through the white vapor, and put his hand flat against the cell wall. It was cold. She flinched back, then stopped herself and looked at his hand, and then back at his face, and something in her expression shifted from terror into something more complicated. She pressed her own hand against the wall from the inside. It was smaller than his. 4 fingers. The tips glowed faintly blue. Adler. Cole's voice again, tight as wire. We have incoming. Unregistered craft, no transponder, closing at attack speed. You need to get off deck 4 right now. I'm not leaving without the package, Kevin said. That is not a package, Cole said. That is a diplomatic asset belonging to the Valari Royal Line, and if she dies on this ship, we are going to start a war that humanity is not ready for. Kevin looked at the crack in the chamber wall. He looked at the girl. He looked at the door behind him. He started breaking the override panel off the wall.
"What are you doing?" Cole said.
It was not a question. It was the voice of someone watching a person do something that cannot be undone. Getting her out, Kevin said. The crack in the outer wall groaned. The incoming craft was not waiting. Neither was he. The override panel came off in his hands in 3 pieces, and he was already rerouting by the time Cole stopped arguing. She did not stop because she agreed with him. She stopped because she had known Kevin Adler for 2 years, and she knew the specific sound of a decision that had already been made. The cell door released with a pressure hiss and a gust of cold air that smelled like clean copper. The girl did not move immediately. She stood at the threshold of the cell and looked at Kevin, the way a person looks at a door that has been locked for a long time. Like, she was not entirely sure the open was real. We have to go, Kevin said. Right now. I'll explain nothing because I know nothing. But whatever is coming through that wall is not here to help you. She was taller than he expected, almost his height. She moved like every motion was a decision. Precise and deliberate, nothing wasted. When she cleared the cell threshold, her hair stopped floating and fell straight, and the faint blue glow at her fingertips dimmed to almost nothing. She looked at his hand, the one he had extended toward the door. And then she took it, not because she was afraid. It was not that kind of grip. It was the grip of someone who had assessed the situation and concluded that this was the most efficient available option. He could work with that. They moved into the corridor at a run, and the wall behind them exploded inward. Not a breach, not a crack. The entire section of outer hull came apart in a controlled demolition pattern, tactical and deliberate. And through the gap came 2 figures in dark pressure suits, with no markings and weapons Kevin had never seen in any catalog. The weapons were already raised. Kevin pulled the girl left into a maintenance corridor so narrow they had to move single file. She did not hesitate. She did not stumble. She matched his speed exactly, and he got the strong impression she had run for her life before. Cole, he said into the earpiece, breathing hard. I need an exit that doesn't involve Deck 4's outer hull. The shuttle bay, Cole said. But Kevin, the bay doors need 40 seconds to cycle, and those suits behind you are going to be on you in, Treya, how many seconds? A pause. He did the math and did not share the result. The maintenance corridor branched right and he took it, and the girl stayed with him through every turn like she was reading his mind or reading the ship. He could not tell which. They burst through a fire door into the upper mezzanine of the shuttle bay, and Kevin hit the bay door controls without slowing down. 40 seconds. The fire door behind them blew off its hinges. The 2 suited figures came through fast, and Kevin put himself between them and the girl without thinking about it, which was either instinct or stupidity, and he genuinely could not tell anymore. He had 1 standard sidearm and a full charge. They had weapons he did not recognize. The girl put her hand on his arm. Do not shoot, she said. Her voice was low and exact, accented in a way that made every consonant land like a stone dropped in water. They are actively trying to... I know who they are, she said. Do not shoot. A held. The 2 figures stopped advancing. They stood at the far end of the bay and did nothing. And the nothing they were doing was the most hostile nothing Kevin had ever experienced. Princess, one of them said. And the word landed wrong, too formal, too sharp, the kind of title you use when you want to remind someone of what they owe you. Come, the king is waiting. She was silent for long enough that Kevin counted the bay door cycle in his head. 20 seconds left. My father, she said finally, sent people who blow holes in Allied ships. Circumstances required expedience. Circumstances, she said. Or orders. Another silence. 18 seconds. 18 seconds. You will come with us, the figure said. The human is irrelevant. Kevin felt her grip on his arm tighten. Not in fear. In the specific way, a person tightens their grip when they are about to say something that will have consequences. He is not irrelevant, she said. He opened the door. 12 seconds. Princess, if my father wants me home, she said. He sends a diplomatic envoy. He sends an official request through the compact. He does not send hole cutters in the dark. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. It had the particular flatness of someone who has been carrying a truth for a long time and has finally decided to put it down in public. So either these orders came from my father, in which case I will be discussing that with him at length, or they did not come from my father, in which case you should be very careful about the next thing you do. 8 seconds. The two figures looked at each other. 5. The bay doors opened and the stars came in cold and immediate, and Kevin was already moving toward the nearest shuttle, pulling her with him, and she came without argument because she had already made this decision before she finished speaking. The speech had been the cover, the movement was the point, and Kevin felt something shift in his understanding of exactly who he was dealing with. They were in the shuttle and the clamps were releasing before the figures reached the bay doors. Kevin hit the burn and the shuttle came off the ship fast and clean and gone, and behind them the unregistered craft was already turning, already tracking, and Kevin ran the numbers again and got the same answer as before. They'll intercept in 4 minutes, he said. The girl was in the co-pilot seat. She was looking at the navigation panel with the focused attention of someone reading a familiar language. No, she said. She reached across and entered a sequence into the nav console. Long, precise, nothing he recognized. 3 minutes, but not for interception. And then it jumped. Not a standard spool. Not anything in the human catalog. The stars outside did not smear or stretch. They simply stopped being there, and then were replaced by different stars, farther and quieter, and arranged in patterns Kevin had never seen. He stared out the viewport for a long moment. Where are we? Safe, she said. And then, quieter, for now. She turned to look at him, and her black eyes caught the light of the unfamiliar stars. And Kevin had the distinct and uncomfortable feeling that he had just stepped across a line he had not known was there. You broke the cell, she said. You did not know who I was. No, you did not know what was coming. I had a rough estimate. She looked at him for another moment in that assessing way, the way you look at something when you are revising your calculations in real time. Why? She said. Kevin thought about it. He thought about the sound through the lab door, and the hand pressed against the cold wall, and the terror in her eyes that had nothing to do with him. You were scared, he said, and someone was cutting their way in. She was quiet for a long time. That is a very simple reason, she said. I'm a simple person. She turned back to the stars. No, she said, you are not. The shuttle drifted through the unknown system, and Kevin Adler sat in the pilot's seat of a craft that had just performed a jump he could not explain, next to a girl whose name he did not know, in a location he could not chart, having just made an enemy of people he could not identify, for reasons that still made complete sense to him. Somewhere behind them, the war he had apparently just avoided starting was either still avoidable or already inevitable. What's your name? He said. She glanced at him sideways. Vale, she said. And you have very bad timing, human. Kevin, he said. And I've been told. The unknown system had no name in any human catalog. Kevin had checked twice, then a third time, then accepted that the navigation database was simply looking at these stars and finding nothing to say about them. Bale had entered the jump coordinates from memory, which meant she knew where she had sent them. Whether she was willing to say was a different question. She had not spoken in 40 minutes. He had used the time to run diagnostics on the shuttle, check their oxygen reserves, 72 hours if they were careful, scan for any pursuit signature, and eat half a protein bar from the emergency kit. He offered her the other half. She looked at it with the expression of someone who had been handed something moderately baffling. It's food, he said. I can see that it is shaped like food, she said. It tastes worse than it looks. Ate it in 2 small bites, made no comment, which he was choosing to interpret as polite restraint. Vale, he said, the people in the suits. You said, Either your father sent them, or he didn't. Which is it? She was quiet for long enough that he thought she was not going to answer. I do not know, she said. And that is the problem. Walk me through it. She turned to face him fully. It was the first time she had done that since the jump, and the quality of her attention was not comfortable. She looked at people the way a person looks at a map, like she was calculating routes. My father is the ruling king of the Valari Second Cluster, she said. Not a ceremonial title. Actual authority over 14 inhabited systems. He is also 73 years old, and in the later stages of a degenerative neurological condition that has been managed but not cured. She paused. The condition affects judgment. We have known this for 4 years. The court manages it carefully. But there are people in the court who would prefer to manage it less carefully, because a compromised king is easier to steer. And a missing princess is a useful piece on that board. She looked at him for a moment. You are faster than you appear, she said. It did not sound entirely like a compliment, or entirely like an insult. It sounded like a recalculation. So either your father ordered this because the condition is worse than you knew, Kevin said, or someone in his court ordered it, using his name, and he doesn't know. Yes. And in either case, you can't go home until you know which. If I go home to the wrong situation, she said, I do not leave again. Kevin leaned back in the pilot's seat and looked at the unfamiliar stars. Where does your ship fit in? He said. The one you were on. Captain Darrett's ship. How did you end up in a containment cell on a human vessel? I requested it, she said. He looked at her. I needed to travel without being tracked, she said. Valari Royal Movement is monitored by 17 independent intelligence services. Human vessels are not considered relevant enough to monitor closely. It was the most effective route. She paused. Your captain was well compensated for the discretion. And the containment cell? Also my request. A cell is harder to access than a standard cabin. I thought it would be safer. She paused. I was partially correct. Kevin thought about the 48 hours she had spent in that cell, alone, on a ship full of people who called her the package, and said nothing. How did they find you? He said. I do not know, she said. That is the second problem. He nodded slowly. The oxygen indicator ticked down another decimal, 70 to 1 hours. Okay, he said. Here's what we have. 1 shuttle, 2 people, 71 hours of air, 1 sidearm, half a protein bar between us. No charts for this system. No communication that won't be intercepted. He looked at her. What do we have that I don't know about? She reached into the inner lining of her jacket, a jacket that had looked plain and now revealed a construction considerably more sophisticated than plain, and produced a small flat device roughly the size and shape of a playing card that glowed faintly at the edges. A contact point, she said. One use. Untraceable for approximately 6 minutes after activation. Who does it reach? Someone who is not in my father's court, she said. Someone I trust. Do you trust easily? No, she said. Do you trust me? She looked at him with those black edge-to-edge eyes, and the stars behind her were cold and quiet, and she said, You broke the cell. You stood between me and the suits. You did not ask what I was worth before you acted. She paused. I am currently updating my position on that. Activate the contact, he said. We need a direction before we run diagnostics on what trust means. She activated the device. For 5 of the 6 available minutes, nothing happened. Then the device emitted a single tone, low and clear, and a voice came through it, speaking Valari so fast and so compressed that Kevin caught nothing. But Vale went very still, and her expression did the thing it had done in the cell. It moved through terror and passed it into something harder and more deliberate. The contact ended. Vale sat with the dead device in her hand for a moment. The situation at home is worse than I thought, she said. How much worse? My father did not send those people, she said. He could not have. He has been in medical isolation for 6 days. The court announced it as a routine treatment. It is not routine. She looked at Kevin. Which means someone in the court has been operating with full royal authority for 6 days without oversight, and they know where you were. They knew where I was. she said. They do not know where I am now. She looked at the unfamiliar stars. We have a window. It will not be long. Kevin pulled the navigation panel toward him and started looking at the stars they were in, not for names, but for patterns, for anything that matched known physics, for a direction. Where do we need to go? He said. There is a station, she said. Not Valeri, not human. Neutral compact space. There is a council seat there, and if I can stand in front of the council with evidence of what has been done in my father's name, the false authority collapses. Evidence, he said. The contact gave me an access code, she said. The records are on a sealed compact archive. I need a hardline terminal. The station has that? Yes. And the people hunting you, how long before they think of the station? She thought for a moment. They are thinking of it now, she said, but they need time to position. We have perhaps 18 hours before they can have assets there. Kevin calculated the jump range of the shuttle against the fuel remaining and arrived at a number he did not love. We can reach it, he said. Barely. Barely is sufficient, she said. He started plotting the course. She watched him work with that particular quality of attention he was getting used to, like being read carefully without pressure. Kevin, she said. He looked up. The person who opened my cell, she said. Who stood in front of the suits? Who did not ask what I was worth? She paused. I will not forget it. He held her gaze for a moment. Let's get you to the station first, he said. Then we can figure out what the rest of that sentence means. She nodded once. Looked back at the stars. He set the course and burned the engines, and the unfamiliar system fell away behind them into the dark. The station was called Vantage Point by the compact's official designation, and something that translated roughly to the corner of everything by the three species who had built it. It hung at the intersection of 4 recognized transit lanes in a system with no habitable worlds and no particular strategic value, except that everyone who needed to get somewhere eventually passed through it. It was also, Kevin had been informed by Vale with no particular enthusiasm, one of the most heavily surveilled locations in compact space. They won't move on us there openly, she said, as the shuttle made its final approach. Too many witnesses. Too many recording systems. The compact takes violations seriously, so we're safe while we're there. We are visible while we're there, she said. Those are not the same thing. The station's docking authority accepted their approach without comment. Kevin had used a civilian transit code pulled from the shuttle's standard registry. Nothing flagged, nothing special, just another small craft requesting a bay. The bay they were assigned was in the outer ring, which meant a longer walk to anything useful, which meant more time in open corridors. They had landed with 43 hours of life support remaining and used 11 getting here. Vale had spent the transit teaching him 3 words in Valari. The words for compact council, archive access, and emergency jurisdiction, and drilling him on the pronunciation until he got them right. She did not explain why. He did not ask. He had developed a working hypothesis that she operated several steps ahead and revealed the relevance of things on a need-to-know basis. It could work with that too. The station smelled like recycled air and machine oil, and about 14 different kinds of food from a service corridor they passed on the way to the archive wing. Compact stations always smelled like that, functional and layered and slightly overwhelming. A smell that said many species have passed through here, and none of them agreed on what a meal should be. Vale moved through the corridor without looking like she was navigating. She was navigating precisely, Kevin realized. He had been to this station before, or had studied it well enough to move through it like she had. The archive access terminal was in a reading room off the main council hall, tucked behind a partition of frosted material that gave the illusion of privacy without actually providing any. 3 other people were using terminals. None of them looked up. Vale sat down and plugged the contact card into the terminal port. Kevin stood behind her and watched the entrance. The access took 4 minutes. He counted. She worked without speaking, pulling files into a compact official record format that would be readable by council systems and, more importantly, verifiable as unaltered originals. Got it? He said, quiet nearly. A figure appeared at the entrance of the reading room. not a compact official, not a station worker. A Valari male in civilian clothes, with the specific kind of stillness that meant he was working very hard to look like he was doing nothing. He scanned the room without appearing to scan the room, and his eyes stopped for one beat too long on the back of Vile's head. "Vile," Kevin said, not louder. "I see him," she said. Her hands did not slow. A second figure appeared at the second entrance Kevin had noted when they walked in. Also Valari, also very still. "How long?" he said. 90 seconds. The first figure started moving toward them, slowly, the way a person moves when they want to reach you before you notice. Kevin stepped to the side, putting himself between the figure and Vale without making it look like that was what he was doing, and made direct eye contact with the figure. The figure stopped. Kevin was not a large person by military standards. Average height, average build, the kind of face that did not particularly warn anyone about anything. But there was a quality to standing your ground that was not about size. It was about the specific communication of someone who has already calculated the cost and accepted it. The figure looked at him and read that calculation and paused. "Done," Bale said behind him. She was on her feet before he turned. The contact card back in her jacket, moving toward the council hall entrance, at a pace that was fast without being a run, because a run in a compact facility was a guaranteed escalation. Kevin fell in beside her. The two figures moved to follow and then did not follow because the council hall entrance had two compact security officers standing at it, big and impartial, and the compact's rules about unauthorized action in council space were not politely worded. Then switched to the compact's trade language, and Kevin heard the 3 words she had drilled him on, even though he did not need them. She was using them herself, clearly and precisely, and the officer's expression shifted from politely neutral to the particular attention of someone receiving information they were legally required to act on. 20 minutes later, they were inside the council chamber. The evidence was in front of a compact duty council member, a large, slow-moving being from a species Kevin knew only from briefing documents, and Vale was presenting it with the same precise flatness she had used in the shuttle bay. The kind of voice that had stopped being frightened of what it was saying some time ago, and was now simply stating facts and waiting for the world to catch up. Kevin sat on a bench at the side of the chamber and watched her work. She did not look at him once during the presentation. She did not need to. She knew exactly where he was. When it was over, when the duty council member had reviewed the files and begun the formal authentication process that would lock the evidence into the compact record where it could not be altered or suppressed, Vale came and sat next to Kevin on the bench. "The court faction loses its authority the moment that authentication completes," she said. "They cannot act in my father's name without documentation that will now be examined." "And your father?" Still in medical isolation," she said. "But now there are compact observers requesting access, which means independent eyes. Will he be all right?" She looked at her hands. "I do not know," she said. "I hope so." Kevin said nothing. There was nothing to say to that. "When the faction realizes what has happened," she said, "they will want to know how I got here, how I got the evidence. Who helped me? You are going to be a known quantity to people who prefer to solve problems with hole cutters in the dark." "I know. You knew that before." She turned to look at him with those black eyes and that quality of attention that he had decided felt less like being assessed and more like being actually seen, which was a different and more uncomfortable thing entirely. Why? She was asking it differently this time. "I don't know how to leave someone locked in a cell," he said. "Never have." She held his gaze for a long time. "That is going to be a problem for you throughout your life," she said. "Been told that too." The authentication terminal across the chamber chimed once, clear and final, the sound of a record being sealed and entered into compact history. The evidence was locked. The chain of authority was broken. Somewhere, in the Valari Second Cluster, a faction that had been operating in the dark had just run out of dark. Vale let out a long, slow breath. It was the first completely unguarded thing Kevin had seen her do. "What happens now?" he said. "Now," she said, "I have to go home and fix what was broken, and you have to explain to your captain why you stole a shuttle." Kevin had been trying not to think about that. "What do I tell him?" "The truth," she said. "You opened a cell because someone was scared, and someone was cutting their way in." She paused. "It is a simple reason. It will be difficult to argue with." She stood, straightening her jacket with the precise motion of someone reassembling their public face. The girl from the cell, the terrified one, the one who had pressed her hand against the cold wall, was still in there somewhere, but she was behind something now, something measured and composed that fit her the way armor fits someone who has worn it for a long time. She looked at Kevin one more time. "Kevin Adler," she said, like she was filing the name somewhere permanent. "Humanity is a young species, small territory, no royal lines, no cluster authority." She paused. "Most Valeri would not have done what you did. Most humans wouldn't either," he said. "Perhaps," she said, "but you did." She walked toward the council chamber exit, and the light from the compact station's high windows caught her hair and made it glow for one moment, silver white and sharp, before she passed through the door and was gone. Kevin sat on the bench alone. 72 hours ago, he had been a corporal following orders on a routine transit run. He pulled out the other half of the protein bar, finished it, and started thinking about how to explain this to Captain Garrett. The authentication terminal hummed quietly across the room. Somewhere in 14 inhabited systems, something had just changed. He had a feeling it was not the last thing that would be. 3 years was long enough to forget some things, and not long enough to forget others. Kevin Adler had been promoted twice, transferred once, and assigned to the 7th Deep Contact Unit, humanity's newest and most diplomatically complex branch of the military. The one that existed specifically because humans kept ending up in situations that the original military charter had never anticipated. Someone high up had apparently decided that rather than keep pretending this did not happen, it was better to formalize the chaos. That was not surprising. She was the princess of a 14-system royal line, and he was a corporal who had been briefly useful in a crisis. These things did not typically result in ongoing correspondence. He had heard about her in the way you hear about anyone when you pay attention to the right channels. The Compact had restored independent oversight of the Valari second cluster. The king had received treatment, real treatment, from a medical team the Compact had helped arrange. The court faction had been dissolved, its members reassigned or removed from power through a process the Compact described as administrative restructuring, and everyone else described as the quiet version of a reckoning. And Vale had been confirmed as successor designate, which meant she was not just a princess anymore. She was the next king. Kevin had read that and felt something he had not immediately known what to do with, so he had filed it and kept working. The 7th Deep Contact Unit was based on a station called Bridge Point, which the Compact considered neutral and humans considered a permanent source of logistical frustration. The work was mostly conflict mediation, first contact support, and the kind of diplomatic presence that required someone to stand in a room and project the specific calm of a species that had been in deep space for 40 years and had not burned anything down yet. Kevin was good at standing in rooms. He was reviewing a contact briefing in the unit's common area when the alert came in on his personal communicator, not his military channel, his personal device. Message, encrypted, Valari routing signature. He stared at it for a moment. He opened it. It was not long. It said, Bridgepoint Station, Compact Council Hall, 3rd hour of the open session tomorrow. There will be a summit on cluster boundary designations. It will be very boring. You should attend anyway. No signature, no title, just the message. He read it 3 times. He went. The summit was, as promised, boring. 19 compact delegates and 4 species representatives debating the administrative language of territorial markers in a region Kevin's unit had no direct jurisdiction over. He sat in the observer gallery and watched and thought about why he was there. The Valari delegation arrived 40 minutes into the session. There were 7 of them, formal and precise, and visually striking in the way Valari formality always was. Layers of structured fabric, each layer a different shade of the same color, moving with controlled effect. They sat on the far side of the delegate floor. Vale was not among them. Kevin looked at the delegation, looked at the time, looked at the door. The door at the back of the observer gallery opened quietly. She was not in formal Valeri dress. She was in compact civilian, plain, functional, the kind of outfit that read as nobody in particular. And her hair was down, and her eyes, when they found him, were still that absolute black that had nothing in it but depth. She sat next to him. She said nothing for a moment. Watched the delegates debate territorial language with expressions ranging from focused to visibly suffering. "This is extremely boring," Kevin said, quietly. "I told you," she said. "Why are we here? Because the council hall is recorded and public, and no one can do anything inadvisable in it," she said. "And I wanted to speak with you somewhere that was safe." It looked at her sideways. "Are you still in danger?" "Less than before," she said. "Not none." She paused. "A successor designate is a more complicated target than a princess in a cell. The cost-benefit calculus changes. Glad to hear politics is working in your favor." "It works in no one's favor," she said. "It simply works." They sat in silence through a particularly heated exchange about the definition of recognized transit corridor in Valari versus compact legal language. Kevin found himself almost interested. Vale watched the debate with the attention of someone reading something in the subtext. "Your unit," she said eventually. "The 7th Deep Contact. You mediate disputes. Sometimes. Mostly, we exist to prove humanity isn't a problem. Are you?" "Usually not. I have been speaking with some people," she said, "about formalizing a direct channel between the Valeri 2nd Cluster and humanity's Deep Contact Division." She paused. "It has been suggested that a dedicated liaison position would be useful. Someone who understands both operating cultures, has existing relationships on both sides, and has demonstrated the specific quality of not leaving people locked in cells." "Is this a job offer?" "It is a suggestion that such a position might exist and that I would support its creation," she said with great precision, "if the right person were assigned to it, and if that person were me." 3 years ago," she said, "you broke a cell door for a reason that you described as simple. You have had 3 years to revise that reason." "Have you?" Kevin thought about it. She nodded once. "I have been asked," she said, "by people who review such matters, whether the human who helped me can be trusted with access to Valeri Council communications. They asked me what I based my assessment on." "What did you say?" "I told them," she said, "that you opened the door before you knew who was behind it, that you stood between me and the suits before you knew what it would cost, and that you did not ask what I was worth." She paused. "I told them those 3 facts were sufficient." Kevin looked at the debate below. The territorial language dispute had moved into a phase involving charts. "Vale," he said. "Yes. Why did you come yourself? You could have sent the offer through channels." She was quiet for long enough that he stopped expecting an answer. "I wanted to see," she said finally, "if you would still be the same person." "And?" She looked at him with those black eyes, and something in them shifted, very slightly, in a way he could not name and did not try to. "Yes," she said, "you are." The debate below reached a procedural pause, and the chamber noise dropped. In the relative quiet, the compact's environmental systems hummed, and the light through the high windows was the pale, even light of a station built to have no weather and no seasons and no particular hour. "I'll take the position," Kevin said. Vale nodded once. Straightforward, the calculation completed. And then she turned back to the debate below. And he turned back to it too. And they sat together in the observer gallery of a boring summit in a station built at the corner of everything. While somewhere across 14 inhabited systems, a king recovered and a court rebuilt, and the specific small chain of events that had started with a broken cell door continued to unfold in directions neither of them could fully chart. She had pressed her hand against the cold wall. That had been the beginning of it. He still did not know exactly where it was going. But he had learned in the years between that this was the particular nature of doors. You opened them before you knew. That was the whole of it. That was enough.